My best friend's ex-boyfriend took my phone at 2 a.m., claiming I was obsessing over finding her, while secretly hiding my dead best friend's bracelet in his car. When I confronted him, demanding an explanation, he just smiled and said, "This is for your own good." That was 18 months ago. Yesterday, he tried to bargain with my parents, begging them to make me stop. My best friend is the reason I believe soulmates don't always have to be romantic. The first time Zoe and I met at summer camp, we made each other friendship bracelets and swore never to take them off. So 5 years later, when search and rescue found her bracelet tangled by the lake, I knew my other half was gone. It didn't matter how many times I heard, "It's not your fault." I felt like an unaliver every single day. Caleb started showing up 2 weeks after the memorial. He dated Zoe our sophomore year for maybe 3 months. Ancient history. But suddenly, there he was, at my doorstep, holding the Starbucks oat milk latte with 2 pumps of vanilla, exactly how I liked it. "Thought you could use this," he said. I wanted to tell him to fuck off, but my mom practically dragged him inside. Dad kept patting his shoulder, telling him how mature he was for checking on me when he was grieving too. They were drowning in fear that they'd lose me to depression, and here Caleb was, throwing him a lifeline. 2 weeks later, he had his own key. My parents were obsessed with the way he brought dinner, made sure I ate. Such a good boy, going through the same loss but still taking care of our girl. I was too hollow to care that he basically moved in. Every night, I'd text Zoe's number about dumb things, knowing she'd never reply. Sometimes I hear Caleb downstairs making my parents laugh, and I want to scream. How could anyone laugh when Zoe was gone? School became Caleb's territory. He drove me every morning, shifting his schedule to match mine. When I kept Zoe's half of our locker decorated with swim team photos and homecoming pics, he sat me down in the hallway. "This is unhealthy," he said, pulling down the photos. "She wouldn't want you torturing yourself." The worst part? How he sighed whenever I cried. "You're disrespecting her memory by wallowing." So I learned to cry in the shower. I wore Zoe's hoodie under my jacket and listened to our playlist through earbuds he didn't know about. Everything shifted the week before my 18th birthday. Over dinner, Mom mentioned my grandmother's trust fund and how it could help with college. I barely processed it, but I saw Caleb's eyes light up before he masked it. That's when I started noticing things. How he asked quiet questions about the money. How he talked about our future like it was already carved in stone. When I said I wanted to use the money to hire private investigators to look for Zoe, his whole face changed. "That money's for your future, our future. Zoe is gone, and wasting your inheritance won't bring her back." He walked away like I'd agree, but he was wrong. Dead or alive, Zoe was my person. Less than 24 hours later, he told my parents I was having delusions, called all our friends, said I was spiraling. They staged an intervention with a therapist who specialized in complicated grief. Even Zoe's parents showed up to say I needed to let her daughter rest in peace. I tried to access my trust fund early anyway, but Caleb had already convinced my parents to require their signatures until I was mentally stable. When I screamed that he never really even loved Zoe, he slammed his steering wheel so hard it cracked. 2 nights later, he stole my phone, said I was using it to obsess over finding her. I waited until everyone was asleep, snuck out to his car to get it back. That's when my hand brushed something familiar. I knew it instantly. It was Zoe's friendship bracelet. The one with pink, purple, and blue beads. The one she wore on her ankle. The one they supposedly never found. My head was spinning. That meant the bracelet by the lake had been planted. My body moved before my mind could process. Next thing I knew, I was barefoot, running through the neighborhood at 2 a.m. Zoe's mom found me collapsed on their porch, clutching the bracelet and screaming.
That's when I started saying that Eric had unalived her. I kept insisting he planted evidence, but I was crying too hard for anything I said to make sense. Eric showed up with my parents and 2 police officers. He played the concerned boyfriend like a pro, telling them I'd been getting worse all week. I looked like the crazy, grieving girlfriend unraveling in front of everyone. As he gently guided me toward the police car for psychiatric evaluation, Lila's 12-year-old brother, Mason, ran outside. While Eric was distracted, deep in conversation with the officers, Mason slipped something into my pocket. "Lila said, if anything happened, give this to you," he whispered. "Not him, only you." It was a flash drive, small, black, with a strip of tape labeled "Backup" in Lila's handwriting. The police car reeked of stale coffee and disinfectant. Eric sat up front in the passenger seat, glancing back at me occasionally through the metal divider while chatting with the officers about my supposed mental decline. I kept my hand pressed firmly against my pocket, feeling the sharp shape of the flash drive through the fabric. The psychiatric facility looked like it used to be an office building. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they processed my intake. Eric stayed close the whole time, his hand on my elbow, never breaking character as the devoted boyfriend. During the evaluation, he told the intake nurse about my delusions and obsessive behaviors. I watched him pull out his phone while I answered questions about suicidal ideation. He typed quickly, thinking I was too distracted to notice, but I caught the message preview. She has it. They assigned me a small room with pale yellow walls and a narrow, uncomfortable bed. The nurse explained visiting hours and the daily routine, while Eric nodded earnestly, asking about my treatment plan like he actually cared. When she left to get my medication, he leaned in close. "This is for your own good. Once you're better, we can move forward with our plans." The first night was torture. I lay awake clutching the flash drive, which I'd managed to tuck inside my pillowcase before the room inspection. Every time footsteps passed my door, I braced for someone to burst in and find it. Morning brought group therapy and a monitored breakfast. During introductions, I noticed a girl around my age watching me carefully. She had the powerful shoulders of a swimmer and bleached, chlorine-fried hair. After the session ended, she caught up to me in the hallway. "You're Lila's friend," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no staff were close enough to hear. "I knew her from swim team. We competed junior year." My throat tightened, and I nodded. "I never believed she drowned," she whispered. "Lila was the strongest swimmer I knew. Be careful who you trust here. Some of the staff report everything back to visitors." Visiting hours came too soon. Eric arrived with my parents in tow, holding a bouquet of cheerful flowers and wearing that same look of concerned devotion. We sat in the common area, supervised by a staff member. He spoke loudly about how much he wanted me to heal, how much he cared about our future. But when the nurse turned away to help another patient, he slipped a folded note across the table. I unfolded it with trembling hands. "Give me the drive, or this gets worse." My hand began to shake. The nurse noticed instantly. "I think she needs some space," she said gently, standing up. "Visits can be overwhelming during early treatment." Eric's jaw flexed, but he kept his act intact. "Of course, whatever's best for her recovery." After he left, I remembered something Mason had said months ago during dinner one night. He was working on a school project, and Lila had helped him with the tech. She showed me how to back stuff up to the cloud, in case my laptop crashed. Computer access at the facility was limited, 30 minutes a day, strictly supervised. I sat at one of the ancient desktops, pretending to work on the mandatory online journal. My hands shook as I navigated to a cloud storage site. I tried different password combinations, inside jokes, favorite songs. Then I remembered the fort we built in her backyard the summer after 6th grade. We named it Fort Ethereal because it sounded magical. That was it. The password worked. The account opened to dozens of folders, all created within the last year. My pulse pounded as I clicked on one labeled Insurance. Inside were videos, photos, documents. I glanced at the staff member.
The staff member supervising the computer room was busy helping another patient with their journal. I clicked on a video file, keeping the volume off. Leela's face filled the screen. She was in her bedroom, wearing the ankle bracelet. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 weeks before the camping trip. During my next phone privilege, I noticed a missed call from Mason's mom. My hand shook as I called the number. "Hello?" Mason's mom sounded weary. "It's me," I said quietly, aware of the staff member nearby. "Oh, sweetheart, how are you?" "Eric was just here. He asked Mason about some drive. He seemed really upset. What's going on?" My mind spun. I needed to protect Mason and the flash drive. Can I talk to him? There was a shuffle. Then Mason's voice came through. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Listen carefully. If Eric comes back, tell him you don't know what he's talking about. Say the drive is hidden at school in my locker. Can you do that? Yeah, Mason said. I can do that. The next few days blurred together. Meds, group therapy, and one-on-one sessions with a psychiatrist who kept circling back to my fixation on Leela's death. I said what they wanted to hear, playing along while counting the hours until I could get back to the computer room. When that time finally came, I plugged in the flash drive under the guise of typing in my journal. The staff member was still across the room, helping someone print a letter. I opened the first file, a video, labeled important. Leela appeared again. This time, she looked frightened. I could see her bedroom window behind her. It was dark outside. She spoke in a whisper. I found out what Eric's planning, she said, glancing toward her door. He found out about my trust fund. He's been researching it for weeks. I have screenshots of his searches, copies of documents he thought he deleted. He doesn't know I figured out his laptop password. Just then, the staff member started heading back toward me. I slammed the video closed. My roommate, a woman in her 30s who'd barely said a word since I arrived, was watching me. When the staff member passed, she slid a piece of paper toward me. Delete the history. They check everything. I gave her a quick nod and wiped the browser history just before my session ended. Eric showed up again during the next family session. My parents looked like they hadn't slept in days, their faces hollow with worry. We sat together in a cramped conference room with a therapist who specialized in family systems. She's been hiding evidence of her delusions, Eric told the therapist. I think we need to search her belongings for her safety. My mom reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. The doctor says you need to stay for the full 72-hour hold, honey. Please, just cooperate. We only want to help you. I wanted to scream, to show them the videos, to make them understand. But I knew exactly how it would look. A grieving girl, already institutionalized, accusing her boyfriend of murder. I had to play this smart. The search found nothing. I'd hidden the flash drive inside a tear in the mattress, a hiding spot my swimmer roommate had shown me. Eric's frustration was impossible to miss, even though he tried to hide it behind that mask of patience. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Leela's videos in my head, her voice, the fear in her eyes. She'd known. She tried to protect me, and somehow Eric had found out. 3 days felt like an eternity. When my parents finally came to take me home, Eric was with them. He sat in the front passenger seat of my dad's car, turning around occasionally to give me his practiced look of concern. We've put some new boundaries in place, Dad said while we drove. Eric explained how you've been obsessing over that bracelet. The one found by the lake was verified by the police. It had Leela's DNA on it. I stared out the window, the flash drive tucked deep inside my shoe. Every passing mile away from the hospital felt like a step closer to danger. Back home, everything had changed. My laptop was gone. My phone had been replaced with a basic flip model that could only call pre-approved contacts. Eric had convinced my parents that limiting my internet access was essential to my recovery. Then a text came through from an unknown number. Your mom gave me your diary to help me understand your grief. These pages about Eric are troubling. We should discuss treatment options. My diary. The one I'd hidden under my mattress.
The one where I'd written about feeling uneasy with how quickly Eric had embedded himself into our lives. My private thoughts weaponized against me. Eric's control tightened more each day. He convinced my parents that he needed to monitor my social media for warning signs. They handed over all my passwords without hesitation.
When my college called about fall enrollment, he intercepted the call. I later discovered that he had sent an email from my account deferring my admission for mental health reasons. The family therapist was the final blow. Eric's mother had recommended her, claiming she specialized in grief counseling. But sitting in her office, listening to her brush off my concerns as imagined patterns, I realized the truth. She didn't know who Eric really was. To her, I was just another emotionally unstable teenager spiraling from loss, spinning conspiracy theories as a defense mechanism. Eric scheduled additional sessions without my input, telling my parents I was resisting treatment. I recognized the isolation tactic from psych class. Knowing didn't make it any easier to endure. I began documenting everything in a notebook Emma gave me during one of our secret meetings. She'd risked Eric's wrath to meet me at a quiet cafe in town. Emma had noticed inconsistencies in his story about the camping trip's timeline. Eric had texted me about joining us, saying we all needed to be there to support each other. When I showed Emma the message, she immediately created a diversion by posting on social media that we were somewhere else. The breakthrough came when Leela's mom contacted me. Emma had mentioned our meeting to her, and she said she needed to talk, without Eric around. We met at the park where Leela and I used to train for swim meets. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and showed me a video from their doorbell camera. The timestamp? 3:12 a.m. the night before the camping trip. Eric stood at their front door, and just behind him, in the window, Leela's terrified face appeared for one brief second, before the curtain dropped. I showed the footage to my mom when we got home. For the first time, her faith in Eric cracked. She kept asking, but why wouldn't Leela tell anyone if she was scared? I wanted to shake her, to make her see what Eric had done to all of us. But instead, I stayed calm and walked her through the inconsistencies in the timeline. My investigation led me back to Leela's social media. Emma had taken screenshots before the posts disappeared. One from 3 days before the trip simply read, "Feeling unsafe." The comments were gone, but Emma remembered Leela had been vague when others asked for details. The family lawyer refused to look at any of it. He said, without law enforcement interest, it's just family drama and speculation. His dismissal burned, but it only made me dig deeper. Mason became my unexpected ally. We bonded over how much we both missed Leela. Eventually, he told me that the night before the camping trip, she had given him something to hide. She called it her insurance. We found it tucked inside a shoebox under his bed. Leela's second phone. The messages she'd sent to a crisis line made my stomach twist. She'd written about her ex finding out about her friend's inheritance. She was scared. She knew he was watching her. Eric's pattern became painfully clear when Claire messaged me after seeing Emma's post about everything. She'd dated Eric back in freshman year and had kept documentation of how he isolated her, just like me. We met at the mall. Claire was calm, composed, as she showed me dated messages and emails. The parallels to what I was going through were chilling. With my 18th birthday 1 week away, Eric turned up the pressure. He told my parents I needed inpatient care. He said my obsession with Leela's death was escalating, dangerous. He knew that once I turned 18, I'd gain access to my trust fund. It was a race now, one he was desperate not to lose. Then, Leela's mom made a discovery that changed everything. She found a voice memo and an old iPad. We listened together. Leela's voice trembled as she spoke. "If something happens to me, Eric threatened me the night he found out about the trust. I'm scared. I know he's watching me." At our next family dinner, Mason brought up Leela's insurance while Eric was passing dessert. His hand froze mid-reach. For a split second, the mask slipped. My parents noticed. That was the moment things began to shift. Eric tried a new tactic, through my mom. He offered a deal. I'll support her getting the trust fund early if she stops spreading lies about Leela. He didn't know my dad had overheard the whole conversation from the hallway. For the first time, Dad questioned his motives.
I spent hours poring over the timeline of Lila's investigation. She had uncovered that Eric had been researching trust fund laws weeks before her death. The signs of premeditation were undeniable. The more I analyzed, the clearer it became. Eric only had power over my parents and the therapist. Lila's family and many of our friends were beginning to believe the evidence. The smoking gun was bank security footage. It showed Eric trying to manipulate a bank employee into giving him information about my trust fund before Lila's death. He'd been planning this for months. Emma risked everything by making a public post in support of me. She chose loyalty to our friendship over her own safety from Eric's retaliation. We spent late nights at her house sorting files, cross-referencing timestamps, organizing witness statements. The bond between us deepened, strengthened by truth and purpose. When Eric tried to pressure me into fabricating evidence to discredit everything and make the problem go away, I refused. The truth was enough, and his panic was starting to show. During a family therapy session, the therapist asked Eric to clarify the timeline of the camping trip. His version didn't match what he'd said before. For the first time, even the therapist looked unsure. That flicker of professional doubt gave me hope. Then Lila's mom accessed her daughter's backup email account. She found drafts Lila had written documenting Eric's increasingly controlling behavior. He had become obsessed with my inheritance. Lila had saved everything: screenshots, messages, private notes. The evidence painted the portrait of a predator who had underestimated how smart his victim was. Claire reached out to Eric's parents after sharing her experience with Emma. Their call to my parents added a new weight to our claims. They were shaken, disturbed by how familiar Claire's story sounded. Emma created a group chat for our growing network. Friends, teammates, former classmates. People started comparing their experiences with Eric. The inconsistencies multiplied. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Lila's family hired a private investigator. Meanwhile, our friends started a crowdfunding campaign to cover legal consultation. What began as scattered resistance became a community-wide effort. The network of support around me was now stronger than Eric's web of manipulation. Then came the confrontation. Eric cornered me at home, his charm completely gone. The threat in his voice was raw as he hissed, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." He didn't realize my dad had been standing in the doorway, recording. The threat was caught, undeniable. That night my parents privately apologized. They admitted they'd been so afraid of losing me they couldn't see what was happening right in front of them. The healing, for all of us, could finally begin. Eric's grip slipped further. His workplace began receiving calls from people concerned about his behavior. His professional life unraveled, just like his personal control. During a support group meeting, Claire laid out the full scope of his pattern. Eric had been targeting young women with access to trust funds, isolating and manipulating them. Lila was the first to resist. She died trying to protect me. I made sure Mason stayed with relatives as the investigation gained traction. Protecting those still vulnerable became my focus. Lila's extended family, school friends, and swim team members banded together. They shielded me from Eric's reach. His attempts to recruit new allies failed as his reputation disintegrated through quiet conversations, whispered warnings, and private messages. My dad saw Eric's barely contained rage when he exploded on my mom in the kitchen, screaming about how she was ruining everything. The mask had fully shattered. Even the school counselor stepped in, advocating for me with the college admissions office after reviewing the timeline of events. The private investigator uncovered that Eric had changed his last name years ago, after his father's bankruptcy. He'd been trying to erase the stain of his family's downfall. His obsession with wealth made more sense now. His past wasn't just broken, it was buried. With my 18th birthday only 48 hours away, the pressure intensified. Eric had scheduled a psychiatric evaluation on the same day my trust fund would become accessible. It was no longer just about justice for Lila, it was about survival, about protecting future targets. Our longtime family doctor reviewed my file and flagged Eric's therapy recommendations as inappropriate and possibly harmful. That professional validation was a turning point. This was no longer just a family dispute, it was real. One afternoon, I ran into Eric at the store. He tried to provoke me, but I didn't flinch. My calm rattled him more than any accusation. I could see it. I was slipping out of his grasp. Even the therapist started backing away. After a colleague quietly raised ethical concerns about her connection to Eric, she began to question the dynamic. Professional lines had been crossed. Finally, someone saw it. The truth kept spreading, quietly, steadily. Eric was no longer welcome at familiar places, coffee shops, school events, even his office. The social consequences piled up faster than the legal ones. I collected notarized witness statements, laying the groundwork for the case ahead. That's when Eric struck back. He filed a restraining order, claiming harassment. He attached out-of-context screenshots, twisted my words, and tried to make me look like the aggressor.
The judge reviewed the evidence and dismissed Eric's petition. Her words echoed through the courtroom. These appear to be reasonable responses to concerning behavior. The legal system had finally seen through his manipulation. Eric lost his job soon after. HR launched an internal investigation following multiple complaints about his aggression. The consequences were accelerating now, catching up to him faster than he could maneuver. My family began therapy with a new counselor who specialized in trauma recovery and coercive control. For the first time, true healing felt possible. Then a friend from Lila's college reached out with something vital. She'd gotten a call from Lila the night before the camping trip. Lila had been documenting everything on her phone. The friend had kept the voicemails, afraid to come forward until now. A clear pattern emerged. Eric had studied trust fund laws, identified vulnerable girls, and manipulated his way in, but he had underestimated the strength of Lila's support system. The final piece came from his own mother. She admitted he'd been fixated on money ever since his father's bankruptcy. Her voice cracked with regret as she confessed she had ignored warning signs for too long, believing he'd grow out of it. Lila's family hosted a community gathering. Survivors, neighbors, classmates, person after person stepped forward to speak. What had once been whispered fear became public truth. The documentation we'd assembled, backed by witnesses, dates, and evidence, laid out a comprehensive timeline of Eric's manipulations. Then Connor came forward. He revealed that Lila's phone had been recording in her pocket during her last confrontation with Eric. The audio file didn't have video, but his voice was clear, threatening, intentional, unmistakable. Both our families and the broader community stood behind me now. Eric's last-ditch effort to twist the narrative that I had pushed Lila and he had tried to protect everyone collapsed immediately. Security footage from the campsite showed me unconscious in my tent at the exact time of Lila's death. Some members of the community hesitated, uncertain. Even my parents, overwhelmed and ashamed, struggled to fully accept the truth in the moment. But I didn't wait for anyone to speak for me. I stood on my own and decided to present all the evidence directly to the community, in the open. No lawyers, no hiding. That's when the cascade began. Eric's other victims, seeing the truth laid bare, finally felt safe to come forward. Each testimony reinforced the pattern, each voice added strength. An emergency meeting was held in the high school auditorium. Eric arrived with his parents, trapped, cornered, and exposed. The auditorium filled quickly. Teachers, students, families, all of them there to hear the truth. Emma stood beside me at the front, helping organize the evidence packets. When Eric entered, his confidence was gone. He looked hollow. His mother wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. I began laying out the timeline, calm, methodical. The doorbell footage played on the big screen. Lila's frightened face in the window drew gasps from the crowd. Eric stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. He charged toward the presentation laptop, trying to shut it down, but several dads from the swim team stepped forward, blocking him. His interruptions became frantic, desperate. But I kept going. With each slide, another part of his false persona was peeled away. Then I played the audio. Lila's voice, Eric's threats, the mention of my trust fund. Silence. You could feel the room shift. Eric made one last plea for sympathy, ranting about loan sharks, unpaid debts from his father's financial collapse. He said he just needed to borrow money, that Lila had overreacted. Then his mother stood up. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. She admitted Eric had developed a gambling addiction back in high school, that she had covered for him over and over, hoping he would change. He never had. The response from the community was immediate. Lila's father stood, then others. A wave of people rose, dozens forming a wall between Eric and me. Private neighborhood security had already been contacted. They arrived quickly. Faced with overwhelming unity, Eric finally gave up. He agreed to leave town for good. Multiple families filed restraining orders across county lines.
His mother promised he'd enter treatment in another state, and more than that, pledged to set up a fund for victims of financial abuse. As Eric was being escorted out, Connor came up to me. He reached into his pocket, his small hand trembling slightly.
Lila's real friendship bracelet, the one she'd hidden with Mason for safekeeping. The pink, purple, and blue threads were faded, but still woven tight. Mason explained she'd switched it with a duplicate before the camping trip, knowing Eric might try to use it as leverage against me somehow. 2 days later, I turned 18. The trust fund became legally mine, with no more interference. The bank manager, who'd quietly followed everything unfolding in the community, expedited the paperwork. I used the first withdrawal to begin setting up the Lila Morgan Memorial Scholarship. The committee formed almost naturally, built from those who had stood beside me through it all. Emma became co-chair, bringing her sharp organization skills and deep love for our friend. We focused on supporting young women pursuing competitive swimming and water safety education, 2 things Lila had championed. Then came the messages. Other young women, victims of Eric's manipulation, began reaching out through the network we'd built. 3 more shared eerily similar stories: financial control, isolation, intimidation. We created a private group to support one another, offering resources, validation, and most of all, understanding. The community's transformation went beyond just removing Eric. Neighbors who once kept their distance now checked in regularly. The walls Eric had built around me fell away and genuine connections returned. My parents joined a support group for families affected by psychological abuse. They learned how to spot red flags, how to listen better. Slowly, they rebuilt the trust they had once surrendered to Eric's lies. My college admission was reinstated after the university reviewed documentation of Eric's interference. They offered counseling services and survivor support. The dean personally called me to welcome me back and ensure I had what I needed to succeed, safely and confidently. 6 months passed before I felt strong enough to return to the lake where Lila's bracelet had been planted. Emma came with me, along with Mason and his mom. We held a real memorial, no scripts, no forced prayers, just flowers on the water and shared memories. Mason told us that Lila had taught him water safety the summer before she died, like she somehow knew he'd need to be strong. The official investigation into her death remained open, but without Eric's confession, legal closure was unlikely. And yet, what we had built, community justice, prevention, exposure, felt like something even more powerful. He couldn't hurt anyone else. Part of the trust fund went toward hiring a forensic accountant. She uncovered that Eric had targeted at least 2 other trust fund recipients in nearby towns before he ever met me. We shared the findings with those communities, expanding our circle of protection and awareness. My parents' transformation wasn't immediate, but it was sincere. They never missed a therapy session. They read books, asked better questions, and slowly they earned back my trust they had once surrendered to Eric's lies. Dad installed new locks and cameras around the house, not out of fear, but as a promise. This time, we protect each other. The original therapist, the one who dismissed me, faced professional review. Multiple families filed formal complaints. She hadn't known about her indirect connection to Eric through his mother, but her failure to recognize clear manipulation tactics raised serious concerns about her judgment. On the first anniversary of Lila's death, we awarded the first 3 recipients of her scholarship. Young swimmers, brave, determined. Their gratitude lit up the room, and for the first time in a year, the grief inside me shifted, no longer just heavy, but purposeful. Eric's family followed through too. His mother sent quarterly updates on his treatment and the victim support fund she'd established in Lila's name. She never defended him. She simply kept her word, trying to do some good with the damage he'd left behind.
The swimming pool, where Lila and I had spent countless hours, became a space of healing. Parents and children, some of whom had once been divided, found common ground in their shared experiences. The silence left behind by manipulation was being replaced with conversations, laughter, honesty. Eventually, I returned to swimming, something Eric had discouraged. The first time I slipped into the water again, it felt like coming home. With each early morning lap, I could almost hear Lila counting strokes beside me. The swim team welcomed me back without questions, just quiet support, presence, and trust. Emma and I launched a peer education program at local high schools about financial control and toxic relationships. We kept it raw, simple, personal. We told our story. We wanted students to recognize the signs we missed. The response overwhelmed us. Teenagers came up afterwards with questions, concerns, and more often than not, stories of their own. And Mason? He grew into his role as the keeper of Lila's memory. Protective, gentle, brave, just like his sister had taught him to be.
Mason started a water safety program for younger kids, teaching them the same life-saving skills his sister once passed on to him. His resilience through grief inspired everyone who watched him turn pain into purpose. The trust fund, once a target painted on my back, became a shield, a tool for protection. Beyond the scholarship, I used it to fund legal consultations for other victims of manipulation and to support the creation of educational materials for schools and families. The money Eric had obsessed over now actively worked against everything he stood for. My return to something like normal came in quiet, gradual steps, sleeping through the night without fear, laughing without guilt, opening up to new people while holding firm to healthy boundaries. Each milestone marked another step away from Eric's shadow and another step toward becoming the person Lila always believed I could be. The community never let their guard down. When a new family moved into Eric's old house, the neighbors shared the story as a warning, not out of cruelty, but out of a shared commitment to vigilance. The network we'd formed to expose him evolved into a lasting system of care, one that looked out for anyone who might be vulnerable. I kept Lila's friendship bracelet in a special box by my bed. On hard days, I'd wear it, feeling her strength threaded into every faded knot. Mason had been right to give it back when justice had been done. Not legal justice, perhaps, but the kind Lila would have valued. Truth, protection, community. The final report on Eric's pattern showed he had researched over a dozen potential targets before setting his sights on me. His precision revealed just how calculated his behavior had been. We shared that report with law enforcement agencies across state lines, ensuring his history would follow him wherever he went. 1 year later, I stood behind a podium at the ceremony for the Lila Morgan Memorial Scholarship. The auditorium was filled. Families who had learned to spot danger, friends who had never stopped believing in me, and people who had found justice not in courtrooms but through collective courage. Eric remained in exile, monitored by the community he once tried to deceive. His obsession with power had led to his downfall, and the very trust fund he coveted now served to shield others like me from predators like him. Through fire, I had gained clarity. Through trials, I found unshakable bonds. And finally, at last, I was free to grieve.